I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dave Potzel, the Public Works Director for City of Camarillo. He's just going to start off with a little welcome.
All right, very good. It's on. Hit the switch. Right, I think we're getting it turned on. Very good. Okay, welcome. Thank you. First of all, yes, thank you everybody for coming out. Continue the conversation on everything water, especially the situation we're under with drought and the need for water conservation. And first of all, I would like to start out with a huge thank you to the City Camarillo water customers, not only city, our neighboring water agencies, Camrosa, Crestview, but just in general, maybe all of Ventura County, even Southern California. Water customers have conserved an amazing amount of water for many years, right? And water conservation has happened, and the use of water overall in Southern California has been reduced drastically over back 10, 15, 20 years, right? And then here we are asking for more conservation. And it's the reality of what we're faced with. But I just do want to acknowledge those efforts that have already been taken by many of you and by many customers to reduce the amount of water use in California. And we're going to need to continue to do that. So a huge part of success in doing that is this kind of forum and communication and collaboration and getting the information out, answering questions, giving assistance to the water customers, the people that turn on the faucets, all of us, to achieve what's needed for conservation. Welcome again, City of Camarillo. I'm the Public Works Director. Our water system falls under Public Works, and the city serves about 2/3 of the 70,000 or so population in Camarillo. There's quite a few different water suppliers that provide water in Camarillo. The city serves, like I said, about 2/3 of that population. About 45,000 population is our customers. And there's a handy map in the back if you didn't have a chance to look at that water service area map, help you see and realize a number of other water agencies that provide water to the customers in Camarillo. So again, really appreciate everybody coming out. Welcome here. We'll have some continued discussion and information from the other agencies that are involved in water here in Ventura County and in this specific area. So I think that's enough for me, unless you're looking, we need to address anything else specific.
Do you want to introduce the panel, or I can introduce?
Why don't you go ahead?
Okay, so first of all, I'm Deborah Gallegos. I'm the management assistant here. I work under the Public Works Environmental Deputy Director. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce the panel. We have Mauricio Guardado. He's from United Water Conservation District. We have Ian Pritchard, who is from Camrosa. And then we also have Dan Drugan, who is from Callegues. And they're going to introduce themselves, their titles, and tell us a little bit about themselves. I'm going to start with you, Ian, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Deborah. Yeah, my name is Ian Pritchard. I'm at Camrosa Water District. I'm the Assistant General Manager. Camrosa serves a good chunk of the other third of the City of Camarillo customers. We're east of the Callegues Creek, so the Mission Oaks area mostly, and then out the Santa Rosa Valley, kind of to the base of the Reagan Library. About 40% of our total water goes to agriculture. 65 to 70% of the drinking water goes to residential, and then you all know what else is over there as far as schools and businesses. And so when I say drinking water, we have two other water systems. We have the drinking water system, which is some water we buy from Callegues and some water we produce out of some groundwater wells. And then we have a recycled water system and this non-potable water system, both of which are used for landscape irrigation and for agricultural irrigation. And to piggyback on what Dave was saying earlier, in the last drought, we saw about a 25% reduction from the previous baseline. Saw a little bit of increase in the year since in 17, 18, 19. And then we've seen another 21 to 27% reduction, depending on what month you look at the last 3 or 4 months. So as Dave said, when in the water industry, we talk about demand hardening. So the more you use, at some point, there's only so much you can cut. And we're getting closer and closer to that all the time. And, our customers are much like Dave was saying about the rest of the city, within Mission Oaks and within Santa Rosa Valley, we've seen significant cuts over the last 10 years. And we're really gratified to see folks coming out and putting in the effort again. And hopefully it looks like we're going to get through, hear from Dan, like we're going to get through the rest of at least this calendar year without having to go too much tighter than the 1 day a week watering for residential customers. And we know what a sacrifice that is, and that it's difficult. It's difficult to see that brown lawn, right, on and the impact on your property values, and for some people. But we appreciate the efforts that everyone's making, and I think that's it. Yeah.
Thanks, Ian. Mauricio, you want to do real
thank
quick?
you.
I'm going to have Dan.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. Mauricio Guardado, General Manager of the United Water Conservation District. And we don't have a direct water connection with the city of Camarillo, but we do a lot of the background work for Ventura County. We've been operating for about 95 years in Ventura County, and residents aren't going to necessarily see United Water on their utility bill. We're doing a lot of the background work by storing large quantities of water. Our largest reservoir is Lake Piru, and we've got about a 334 square mile service area from the mountains to the coast. And it's real important what we do in when there is water available, either through our state contract connection, precipitation, of course, is to not only store that large quantity of water so we can deliver it and convey it over time, especially in these drought conditions, but also when there's water, the Santa Clara River, we take that water, we divert it to our facilities, and we put it into recharge basins. Those recharge basins are extremely important because that gets water back into the groundwater table so that cities, municipalities, and agriculture can use their wells productively to ensure that the customer still gets what they need. It's been a lot more difficult, obviously, in these times, but I think fortunately for a lot of those efforts, there is still stored water and there's still groundwater available, again, to meet the needs of the community. All more important, you've heard Ian even mention that you can only cut your way, cut so much, out of the situation. We really got to build our way out of it. And my message to the public, because a lot of the facilities are tucked away, a lot of the planning, a lot of the construction you can't necessarily see, a lot of the water transfers, exchanges you're not involved with, but the water industry isn't just starting as a reaction to the drought crisis. We've been working really hard to try to become more sustainable, and it's going to take that regional approach and collaboration with multiple water agencies is going to be the way we not only get out of the crisis, but also we don't want to be in this situation again. And so the goal is to be drought tolerant. The goal is to be water sustainable. And there are a number of projects and efforts going on right now that I think we'll see come to fruition in the future to make sure that we can weather these types of situations moving forward. So that's a little bit about our operation. Again, we also have a wholesale operation where we serve cities potable drinking water. So kind of do a little bit of kind of multitasking when it comes to water operations.
Thanks, Mauricio. Next, we have Dan Drugan from Callegas.
Actually, if I could add on a little bit, so we're being a little bit informal here, but as the others have been speaking, I realized I missed some information that should be conveyed and is helpful as far as Camarillo's sources of water. And Mauricio was alluding to projects that are happening, and we've got a really, really good one, important one here in Camarillo. But cities' water sources are generally 60% what we call imported water, and that's the water that comes from the Northern California State Water Project through Callegas, the wholesaler that we purchase that water from. So about roughly 60% imported water and 40% local groundwater. We have 4 wells within the city water system that pumps into the system. So a 60-40 And two of the wells in the northern eastern part of the system up by the hospital are in a very brackish groundwater table. And that's the reason for our desalter project that many of you are aware of and have heard of, that has been in the plans for a long time. As Mauricio indicated, a lot of things happening behind the scenes without people realizing it or seeing it until finally we've been under construction. And the desalter now is fully constructed. We're in the final stages of operations and testing. We ultimately need to get a permit from the state to be able to sell that treated water to our customers. So we're in that final window of achieving that. But anyway, a very important project to build local resource of water here that we have for sustainability. It's going to flip that percentage to at least 60% local water, and then eventually even more, getting closer to 75 or 80% local water and less reliance on imported water from through Calleguas and from the state, which is quite expensive. So ultimately, the desalter, we're looking at being able to save the city almost nearly $50 million over about 20 years because of that cost of water differential. So anyway, just one of the few projects. Camrosa already has a desalter online that they use, and other projects coming online as the region looks at developing other sources of local supplies of water for sustainability into the future. So really, really exciting, good things happening, and we're all going to be working together to continue that. So now I'll turn it over to Dan with Calleguas.
Okay, great. Good evening. My name is Dan Drugan, and I'm with Calleguas Municipal Water District. And a little background about Calleguas: we are also a wholesaler, like United Water Conservation District. We don't serve end residents and water users. We serve cities and other water districts that serve all of us at home. So the city of Camarillo and Camrosa Water District are customers of Calleguas. In Calleguas, we operate as an extension of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. That's a behemoth agency. They import water from Northern California and from the Colorado River Aqueduct, which they own and operate. Calleguas, we were formed in 1953 to provide a supplemental water source to the communities we serve. We've since expanded. We cover the areas as far east as Simi Valley, all the way down into the Oxnard Plain, and we share a customer with the city of Oxnard and Port Hueneme with United Water Conservation District. It's very important because if Oxnard, their water supplies are impacted, they would have to buy more imported water from Calleguas, which strains that resource for all of our customers. Now, the issue at hand is the state water project. Our agency is considered a state water project dependent area. That's a term you might have seen in the news. And what that means is that Southeast Ventura County and the customers that fall within the Calleguas service area are highly dependent on this resource, that snowmelt from the Sierras. What we're dealing with is a very highly variable hydrology up north. From year to year, the snowpack, it's either feast or famine, especially so over the last 10 years. In fact, over the last 10 years, we've only seen 2 years that have been significantly above average. And right now, 2020 through 2022, this year, we've had 3 consecutive critically dry years with the Sierra snowpack. And so what has happened because of that is that our watersheds are extremely dry. Up north, the conditions are such that they need to prioritize the water supplies behind that huge reservoir Lake Oroville, which is the keystone reservoir of the State Water Project, to push out the salinity that's intruding into the Bay Delta. It's very important because the Bay Delta, that's the confluence of where our Feather River runs right into with the Sacramento, the San Joaquin River. And that area is where we pump water south. We export that water to here, to Southern California. So the Department of Water Resources, they're the operator of the State Water Project. That's a state agency. And they need to maintain the water quality of that area. So what that means is any water that's exported south to our area is for critical human health and safety needs only. So to set the stage for you, you've heard that a lot of these emergency restrictions, the 1-day-a-week watering, well, that went into effect June 1st. And it's going to go on until the end of this year. In fact, probably into next year as well. And the reason for that is that we are taking water supplies that we don't have. There is not enough water to meet normal demands this year. So the Department of Water Resources, they're providing additional water supplies to meet critical human needs only, people, indoor water uses, not outdoor landscaping. Now, it's very complicated when the Metropolitan Water District has some of their own supplies separate from the human health and safety water, right? So they have supplies that they've banked in the Central Valley, other supplies available to them in storage. And so they're using those minimal supplies that they have and the human health and safety water, and providing that to Calleguas, and we provide that to Camarillo and Camrosa. Now, when you use all those supplies together, including their local supplies that they just mentioned, we have to have a clear message to the public on what that means, right? And so that's the 1 day a week watering restriction that we currently have. A lot of folks ask, well, why can't we divide up that watering requirement 2 days a week? Well, the 1 day a week really is to help with enforcement. The situation is so dire right now that we could be in a no outdoor water use situation. That's the situation we're actively trying to avoid right now. And so to do that, the 1 day a week watering restriction allows our purveyors, the city of Camarillo and Camrosa, to get out there and see if folks are adhering to it. Are you really using that water for 1 day a week, 10 minutes per station? That's the limitation that's been set out by our parent wholesaler. That's the expectation from the state, that if you're using this water for human health and safety supplies, it has to be prioritized for indoor water uses only. Now, the issue, right, is, well, Dan, is it really that bad? I mean, what happens next year, right? If we're coming up into our winter months here, well, if the storms don't come in, if we have another really below average snowpack year, another 5% state water project allocation, we could be in no outdoor water use starting in spring of next year. And what does that mean? That means that most of your functional turf areas will likely have additional water for them, like your sports fields, your parks, your community areas. But homeowners and your turf, we're going to ask you to let it go. You cannot water turf at all. That's what we're doing right now. We're asking you to prioritize that water 1 day a week for trees. But when it's 0 day, that's when we're really going to come out and tell you, look, you got to let the turf go. It's not that we have an anti-turf agenda as water agencies. It's just that this is what we have to focus on. And climate change is making that a priority for us, and is that the outdoor water use component is the component that we need to focus on. And so Dave mentioned the conservation. We're seeing water levels, sales from Calleguas that we haven't seen since 1976, which is remarkable when you consider how much we've grown since the 70s. Now, are we getting to the point of diminishing conservation returns? Maybe, but we need folks to be prepared, and we're very, very happy that you're here tonight to hear this message from us, because it could get worse next year.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, so now's the time to allow the public to ask questions. I want to make sure that we note that this is a productive conversation. So if anybody has any questions, you can raise your hand. Otherwise, we can go to the online questions. If you stand up or just ask your question, I'm going to repeat it so that the hybrid online can understand or hear the question.
So just to confirm, you can still water lawn once a week.
Yes.
We're from Camrosa, so, but you still can.
Yeah, the question was just to confirm that you can still water at a home your lawn once a week. And yes, you can.
Any other questions? Okay, I have one on the card here. Oh, yes.
Yeah, the question is, what foreseeable challenges do we see with the desalter? I mean, one of the current challenges is to finish the project up and get it operational. So that has been a challenge. But as far as how the project has been planned and constructed and how it's gonna perform, we really see that meeting the need for what its purpose is treating that otherwise unusable source of groundwater. It's really any specific challenges really don't come to mind, other than one of the elements of this project even being possible is obtaining the ability to pump the water, and that was needed to be granted from the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency. That's the agency that oversees the pumping of all the groundwater in the majority of Ventura County. And so the city received that special allocation for this brackish groundwater, because otherwise it's totally unusable. And with that allocation, or that approval to pump that water, also is a monitoring and a contingency plan. So we're under very strict requirements to monitor the groundwater within this area. Numerous wells, I can't remember the exact number, 12 or so groundwater wells all around the area that we monitor on a quarterly basis, and take such readings such as water level, We're checking this elevation at those wells to make sure there's no groundwater or ground subsidence, water quality. And one of the key quality parameters is salts, right? So I mentioned this brackish water that's in the brackish groundwater. It has that we call it a plume. It's an area of brackish water underground that we don't want to migrate any further. And so that's being monitored also, that level of salinity in the groundwater. And so as we operate the desalter over the years, we'll be continuously monitoring that. And if there's any negative impact to the groundwater because of that, of our pumping that water, there's provisions in that plan to reduce the pumping. So we make sure there isn't any negative effects on the groundwater. So that's a, keeping that facility operational and continuing that monitoring and then adjusting any of the operations is going to be one of the major challenges ahead of us. But we see it as an achievable challenge. It's been well planned, well thought out. It's well regulated, and we're looking forward to that being fully operational. And we have a contract with an operator that's a long-term contract to operate the facility for us also. And then just continuing to meet the regulatory requirements is always a challenge. But again, these agencies that are represented here tonight, plus many others across the state, are well equipped to meet the regulatory requirements to deliver clean, pure, potable drinking water.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add something quickly to that. Dave mentioned that Camrosa has a brackish groundwater desalination facility. Ours is about 20% the size of Camarillo's, but it's been online since 2014. And we've already had the operators that will be operating the Camarillo desalter. They've been in contact with our operators. We've had the same operators at our plant since it's come online. They've been in contact with our operators for about a year while they've staffed up. They've taken multiple tours of our plant. So the water industry is a pretty small world after a while, and you guys have great operators. They've got great operators on staff, and we've been able to share a lot of the knowledge and experience. So hopefully some of the challenges that we've experienced, the Camarillo crew will be able to avoid and learn from, and get the plant up and running and be smooth sailing, maybe a little quicker than we were.
Let me go ahead and have this gentleman ask a question. I'll come back to you in just a minute.
No, so the question was, is the construction project that's happening on Santa Rosa Road and Hill Canyon, is that the desalter? And no, so the Camarillo city of desalter is behind the library-ish, right? The Hill Canyon project is a Camrosa project, and that's a granular activated carbon treatment plant. So we had to put that in because there was a new water quality regulation that went into effect in 2018. There's a new, it's not a new contaminant, it's a legacy pesticide byproduct called 1,2,3-trichloropropane, or TCP. And it's been hanging out in the bottom of that aquifer for a long time, since the 60s and 70s. And there was the state of California propagated a new maximum contaminant level. So that's the drinking water regulation level, above which you have to treat for if there's a contaminant above that. So that showed up in our drinking water out in, we call that the Conejo well field that's right there. So the Santa Rosa Basin, that TCP showed up in 2018. And when we were required to test for it, we took the wells offline, and we've been building that treatment plant since. They're essentially, I know they're pretty big tanks, but those 6 vessels you see are like industrial size Brita filters. So they have the carbon that's in them is this media that captures the contaminant, and that will be changed out once or twice a year, depending on how fast it picks up the contaminants. So that should come back. So that's our biggest water resource, or local water resource at Camrosa. It makes up about 20% of our drinking water. So that's been offline for the past almost 4 years, 3+ years.
How big is that outlet?
So the Santa Rosa Basin underlies pretty much the majority of the Santa Rosa Valley. So really from you're making that curve out in Santa Rosa all the way till you get out to Moore Park Road, Tierra Hada. It's an alluvial basin that picks up recharge pretty well, rainwater and from the creek. And so we have 4 wells in that right there along Hill Canyon. We've got 3 other wells that feed the drinking water system and a handful of other wells that are ours and some agricultural producers that produce out of that basin. So it's a pretty productive basin, and it recharges pretty well, both from the creek and from rain events, when hopefully we get soon. Right, and so there will not be, the TCP is staying in the basin, but it won't be in the drinking water. Yeah.
Did you want to ask another question?
So, I'm addressed from an HOA that. So, but as on the landscaping committee, I'm trying to foresee, which I know you can, but I'm hoping you give me a little bit of insight on, I realize that this is going to continue on, like you said, to the end of the year. Maybe even into maybe all of it. So, well, what I'm looking at is we have all this dead stuff. So do we take all the dead stuff out and not plant anything and make our place not look good? Do I do hardscaping here, which is very expensive, which I do we change everything over to drip? I mean, I'm trying to do, because everything is pretty much died and we're trying to save the trees, but so I'm trying to do like a forecast, a scope, and present it to the community and the board. Okay, this is where we're going to need to go. It looks like this is not going to get better anytime next year. So I'm trying to figure out. We do have a golf course that we don't need, but it's full of grass. Do we want to keep maintaining grass?
Well, I don't envy you those choices. They're very difficult choices. Dan,
Yeah, I can jump in first. So, depending on what kind of dead stuff you're talking about. So if you have turf that you'd like to remove, there is a rebate for that, a turf replacement program. It does, you can go to bewaterwise.com and apply for that. But if it's something else, like other types of vegetation that's dying that you'd like to remove, I strongly recommend mulch. Mulch is key for soil health, right? And having bare soil is very, it's not great for trees. It's not great for the plants that you'd like to keep, in a very lively state. So I would definitely recommend mulching around your areas to keep the soil health preserved. And then, obviously prioritizing the small amount of watering that we have for those trees. So mulch, that's probably the most important thing you can do.
Okay, so for seeing, you don't see full in history. I mean, it just, it seems like we've been drought.
Right. So you're probably asking long-term forecasting and how do we get into that? Right. And I think, we're pointing at the state because their crystal ball isn't that great either. Their projections of what we would normally take from the system have been completely off, right? We're living in a time that has never been experienced before. And so how do you move forward with that, right? I think the state is going to hopefully invest in more climate change modeling, more climate change based modeling, so we can understand what kind of futures we have here. I'll give you one example. So last December, we had the snowiest month on record, right? I doubt that's probably going to happen again this December. It's shaping up to be a third consecutive La Nina year, which there hasn't been that many in California history. So I think we can count on next year being dry. And I think we can count on the 1 day a week being our best option for next year. And it could be worse. If we don't receive, I would say at least a 10% statewide project allocation, it's likely that no outdoor water use is going to be our reality as soon as next spring. So 1 day a week probably is what we're going to be seeing for at least the immediate future.
I've got another take on it. Could I
Oh, sure.
kind of answer that? certainly while there's no crystal ball and a lot of people are asking like, well, what is it going to look like down the line? There's a lot of discussion about climate change, obviously, and the drought. And, I think a lot of that is, those are effects of certain actions or inactions. And I think for the future, and when you look at like how we got here to begin with, yeah, we're going to experience drought. It's the region we're going to be in. But back in the day, that was supposed to be planned for. And there's a lot of smart, brilliant people out there that have designed and analyzed what the state needs. And for over a decade, for one reason or another, whether it be regulatory circumstances, funding, the appropriate infrastructure just hasn't been built. It takes a long time for facilities to get online. And the question is, what do we do about this in the future? Make sure you're engaged with your legislators, open up that funding mechanism for infrastructure. You've seen in the governor's proposal that there's a lot of language in there that talks about revising and improving the regulatory circumstance, curtailing, but take science and engineering in consideration when making certain policy decisions. And I think until we resolve some of those issues in Sacramento, we're not going to be able to sustain, droughts in future years, because every time we go through this, if you can't recharge groundwater, if you can't fill reservoirs, your baseline gets lower and lower and lower. And the contaminants that people are talking about, those heavy metals and everything else that are at the bottom of these basins, well, then now that's what you're going to see in the water. It's going to get more expensive to treat when there is a solution. It's about taking advantage of the opportunities when water is available. And if we had the reservoirs, if we had the right to divert water when it becomes available, instead of just letting it run by, well, that would help. Does it fix everything in a year, 5 years? But at least you'll start building your way out of it instead of constantly cutting your way out of it. So stay engaged with and make sure you're engaged with those legislators to open up those policies and better interpretations and funding mechanisms. And again, that's just kind of another, I think, component of stuff that I don't think residents, really hear about or understand, thoroughly, because again, it's a lot of the stuff that happens in the background.
Thanks, Mauricio. Want to go ahead and ask your question?
I actually wrote that question, but I didn't write it very well, so I'd like to ask. We do in Camarillo or is Camrosa have non-potable recycled water available, but I'm still the same HOA she is. We have a small HOA. We have really like that.
Yeah, you guys are at Cam Springs, the Rancho Adolfo Estates. Okay, Rancho Adolfo. Okay. I was gonna say Cam Springs is close to the non-potable and could get. The question was, does Camrosa have non-potable and or recycled water? And can we get that? Can we expand that system? So we do have non-potable and recycled water systems. The difficulty with expanding those systems in areas that are already built up is most of a water distribution system is laid down as the developments are being built, right? So it's a dirt patch, you put in the pipeline first, build the houses on top of it, and then put in the roads. So going back to install a recycled or non-potable distribution system requires tearing up a whole lot of road, which is an inconvenience and also terribly expensive. So the way that Camrosa has approached expanding its non-potable system is really looking for the biggest bang for our buck. And HOAs, parks, and golf courses and those kind of large areas, expanses of grass are obviously a good place to look, right? Smaller pipe for a large amount of turf. The other difficulty, so in that way it would pencil out. The other difficulty is that we have over the course of a year, we have a pretty big block of water that we don't use in our service area, and we sell to Pleasant Valley County Water District, which is just west of us. It's 100% agriculture. They get some water from us, some water from the ground, a lot of water from United. So they're just south of here, just west of us, just east of United in Oxnard. We deliver that water to them in the winter time, in parts of the year when there's not a lot of demand in our service area. The difficult thing is that we almost run out of that water in August. So last week when it was super hot, agriculture, this year's a little, because that water source isn't impacted by these conservation regs. It was a big irrigation week last week on the non-potable system, right? So, and during those days, we don't have a ton of storage on that system. So what we're pulling off of the creek is those pumps are screaming, and pumps are screaming it to meet demand in the summer periods. So we don't have a lot of extra water day to day in the summer. So there's a couple things that are impacting our ability to expand that system. So we would need really more storage, seasonal storage, plus more pipe, both of which are, require land and timing and money, right?
That's still being, so the question was, when we move to 0 day per week watering, what does that actually mean? And can we still water trees? And that, I would say that's still being negotiated at this point. I don't think Metropolitan Water District would want to see any trees die, nor the state of California, but turf is going to be asked to be let go. So I think at this point, we're still working through that with Metropolitan Water District and our purveyors, but I don't foresee that trees would be impacted by this.
And one of the things we've started to do at Camrosa, and we're talking with Camarillo about the possibility of expanding that. We have a couple areas right now, one in our district out in Santa Rosa Valley, right up Gary Road. It's a non-potable pump station, and we've turned it into a filling station. We're open from 8 to 4 on Saturdays right now, and you can bring a container, 50 to 300. Some people bring more than 300 gallons, and you can fill up at no cost besides the cost of taking your container out there, right? You fill up with non-potable water for use on your property, and we expect to, we're talking about how we can make that a permanent thing. The city of Ventura and Las Virgenes Municipal Water District, they have recycled water filling stations that are permanent, that their customers can come get water out of year round. We're talking about doing that in Camrosa, making this kind of seasonal drought response non-potable filling station a permanent thing. I was talking with Ken right before the meeting about partnering with the city of Camarillo to do that, since we have overlapping jurisdictions. So that would be and there's other ways to get that water to folks, whether it's a water truck that we start a subscription service. So we're talking about these ideas because we want to be able to use these resources that we have, even if we don't have the capability of building storage and expanding the system in a permanent pipeline way, a way of bringing that value to folks in our service area. So we're definitely, and if you guys are interested in that, we want to hear about that at Camrosa. So yes. Okay.
We obviously at Rancho Adolfo care about our outdoor areas. You talked about this recycled water. If we had a big storage tank, and I have no concept of what a big storage tank that would be this body would hold, and how we would, kind of talk to come to how much would that cost us, something you would need a service for that. I'm just brainstorming, but
yeah, and we've had discussions with other HOAs along those same lines, and they're starting to try to cost that out also. So I would encourage you I can give you my number and we can keep in touch and talk about that. It's all about money, right? We can figure it out.
Okay, thank you. The next question?
Also, special dispensation for scenic golf courses. Is there a dispensation for private golf courses? Because you have a golf course that have trees on it. Are we allowed to water that more than once a week?
What is the area that you're referring to?
Private golf course.
Within Camrosa or Camarillo? Camrosa, right. So typically how we view golf courses and play fields, sport fields, other community fields that are being utilized, that's still functional turf grass. That's the guidance that we've given our purveyors. So it really is up to the purveyors on how they enforce that. But I would anticipate that that golf course would still be allowed an extra day of watering. Most golf courses that are using potable water supplies right now are on 2-day-a-week watering, while most folks are on 1 day a week. The reason for that is that those are functional turf spaces. You still need those community spaces, for mental health, for community, community value.
Okay.
Yeah, we consider golf courses and even one basket is going to have issues, right? And part of the thing is that, as Dan was saying, the state water project forecasts and assumptions were made at a time when the understanding of our hydrology was different than it is today, and the environment, not like the weather environment, but the political and environmental environment was different than it is today. And the assumptions that we made about the reliability of those water sources is just different, right? I mean, they're talking now, they use terms about a low to no snow future. You know, when we talk about the Western Sierra being a reservoir, and if you're talking about there's no snow, there's no reservoir, right? So to Mauricio's point, it's like, well, what are you going to do instead? And, you know, there are agencies, and I think that, you know, this group up here today represents a pretty forward-looking group, and looking at different ways of meeting the demand that's really not going anywhere, right? You know, the city of Thousand Oaks, Camarillo, Simi Valley are all what we call state water project cities. They were incorporated after those contracts were signed with Callegas. So the existence of these cities in the eastern part of the county owe their existence to the state water project, right? And the fact that that is now, there's questions about the reliability of that is a pretty big deal. You know? Okay. Yeah, and I'll let. Yeah, all right.
So you've jumped across Callegas Creek to the west side, which falls under city water service area. So actually, and speaking of forward thinking, when Village at the Park was developed and planned, a recycled water system was included in the development and the construction there. So that I think it's 55 acres of sports fields at Village at the Park is all irrigated with Camarillo recycled water from our wastewater treatment plant, along with the YMCA. I believe most all their irrigations recycled. Quite a bit of the medians that are maintained by the HOA in Village at the Park are irrigated with recycled water. Yeah, so. Sure.
I'm gonna let the purveyors.
Yeah, maybe that would be
speak to
good.
that.
Yeah, maybe just to set the table for how all that has come to be. As Dan has mentioned, the reason for these restrictions is coming from the minimal amount of state water project water that we have, and so Metropolitan and then Callegas put forth the restrictions to 1 day a week watering, and then required the agencies that sell the water to customers to implement those, along with monitoring and enforcement programs to maximize the adherence to those restrictions, all for the purpose of reducing water use, right? For that conservation. So each agency has developed the specifics for the watering restrictions, and then the specifics to monitoring and enforcement of those restrictions. So there's been a concerted effort countywide, especially East County-wide, to unify those messages and the efforts. There is a little bit of variation from city to city, just as you have variation amongst city council members, city to city. But it's just a reality. But I think we've done a really good job in this county at unifying that message. So to cut to the chase on the specifics, Camarillo utilizes a consultant to assist us with and be the primary enforcement and more on the monitoring and education effort. That's what we're really focusing on monitoring and education and getting the information out, but then also taking a drive around town on a regular basis at varied days and varied hours to take a look at those locations that aren't following the restrictions, especially the 1 day. So in Camarillo, we've got Saturday, Sunday watering, depending on your address. No, Tuesday, Thursday. I'm sorry. I live in Simi Valley. I'm sorry. My bad. I live in Simi Valley, and it's Saturday, Sunday there. So Tuesday, Thursday. Anyway, so we are, and again, for the purpose of finding those folks that may be unaware that their sprinkler system's going off every day, every morning, and not aware. So there's that monitoring, and then leaving information at the door, following up with the customer to verify that the sprinkler timer is being adjusted, Sometimes there's a sprinkler head or two missing. That wastes a lot of water. Doesn't ever get on anything it's trying to water, right? So that's the approach. But we do have, and we have increased that. We've had a monitoring and enforcement and education program for years in Camarillo, utilizing a consultant. We've essentially doubled, maybe almost tripled those efforts now during this time of increased conservation requirements. So that's our approach here in Camarillo. Again, looking to gain compliance and education, and it's working. It is working. We are seeing reductions in water use, and by and large, most of our customers that we are in contact with appreciate and are interested in complying and adjusting. You know, obviously saving water, that's a scarce resource, but also saving some money along the way. Right. If a person's irrigation can be more efficient and use less water, it's a win-win across the board. So I'll let Camrosa touch on those efforts also, kind of hopefully ditto, but.
Yeah, ditto. We have, I think the main difference between us is that our hours on Tuesday and Thursday are like one off. We're 9 to 5, they're 8 to 4, but otherwise it's pretty much the same. One thing I do want to add is that Camrosa is doing the education and monitoring primarily first also. And we all have access to rebates through Metropolitan Water District for turf removal and for water efficient devices. We've also, both us and the city are contracted with WaterWise. You can see Brian in the back. We can do landscape water audits. So WaterWise will come look at your sprinkler system, make sure you're not missing any of those heads, and they can provide guidance on how to reduce water use outside. And they do indoor water use audits. They do some other rebates through Camarillo. So both our agencies are really looking for that education and monitoring. And I want to echo another thing Dave said, which is the response that we get from customers. In the 2015 drought, we went through a very similar process, and we had most of the folks that were, 99% of the folks that were overusing were really unaware either of their use and or of how to reduce their use. And we saw like significant response just from education. So we don't currently have any water jails. I haven't talked to Dave about it, but I hopefully not.
Okay, go ahead. Then we have a question from our online viewers.
So in regards to the rebates for lawn turf removal, I'm currently in the process of getting approval to remove 1,600 square feet of my turf at my house. But I'm looking at the state WaterWise website and it's saying that it's only about 50% funded now. I'm a little worried about getting my approval in order to still be able to get the funding, the rebate. Is the state planning on refunding that so that the rebates continue? And also I have 6 rain barrels, which this last rain has given me 330 gallons of water on my property. But I'd like to expand my rain barrels, but the state would only give me $300 rebate on rain barrels. So I'm just wondering, is there going to be additional money for maybe more rain barrels? Or will they continue funding the turf removal even after what they currently show is gone?
Right. So the question was on the funding availability for turf removal and other rebate programs such as rain barrels. And for turf rebates, the funding will still be there. There was a huge run on the program starting right after Metropolitan announced those restrictions. And in June, there was a huge influx of applications that came in to the system. But right now, the $3 per square foot for residential is still intact. And so we definitely encourage folks to get in there and reserve your rebate as soon as you can. Regarding rain barrels, there is a limit on the number of rain barrels you can actually receive a rebate on. They won't rebate, I think, more than just 2 rain barrels. But there are other rain barrel sales. Typically, they're at a discount when they're at that sale anyway. I believe that Cayugas, we are going to host a rain barrel sale coming up here in November. So I can get your contact information and share that out, and also share it with the purveyors, and they can send that to their customers. So coming up this fall, we will have at least 2 rain barrel sales up at our headquarters in Thousand Oaks.
Okay, this is a question from our Zoom customers. What percentage of homes in Camarillo have pipes delivering both potable and non-potable water?
I'm looking at some of our to our technical staff. as far as potable and non-potable to the home?
I'm gonna say it's probably about.
Answering the question is Dale Reynolds, City Camarillo Water Superintendent.
How are you? Most of our reclaim system is in the Village of the Park area. So when I look at that, it's probably about 15 to 20% of our system current, or a little less, for reclaimed water.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
So I also in the process of. However, our landscaper says that if you place it in hardscape, that does not count. Is that true? And so why? Because
Yeah,
that
I can-
doesn't make sense.
So I can answer that. So the question was, how come I can't replace turf with just hardscape? Why can't I just replace it with artificial turf, for example? Why can't I choose my own method for what I want to replace the turf with? The reason is that there's the Metropolitan Water District has adopted two goals for that program. One is water savings, right? So that's inherent with taking out the turf and replacing it, but also sustainability. And so the sustainability goal has incorporated a certain amount of plant coverage. You have to have a certain amount of plantings. You have to have an irrigation changeover. You do have to have a watershed feature within your landscape, such as a swale or perhaps a rain barrel. So again, the reason that we have that requirement in place is that the Metropolitan Water District essentially mandated it. So our artificial turf is not allowed in the rebate program. Just plain hardscape, that's not allowed. It has to have these other features to comply with both water savings and sustainability.
We are putting in a lot of drought resistant plants as well. It's a big problem. But so the rebate will just cover the areas where there is dirt and resistant plants.
Well, and I would encourage, so the question was more specifics on this project, but I would encourage you to reach out or whoever's managing the project to bewaterwise.com and the vendor to talk through it, because if there is a certain amount of plantings in your project, that should be able to be covered. So I would definitely encourage the project manager of that to talk to bewaterwise.com.
Okay, so we're gonna wrap it up here at 7 o'clock. I want to thank all of you for coming out. We appreciate your conservation efforts, and I want to thank the panel. Thank you guys very much. We do have some flyers and information about the turf replacement programs and rebates, the ordinances. We have some conservation giveaways in the back. Help yourself. We have some water also. Waterwise representative Brian is here. And so if you have any questions about any of the rebates or turf replacement programs, he can help you. If any of you want to do a tour of the garden, Noah, who's standing up right here, will help you over here at the back by City Hall. And thank you again.